Welcome to Grappling with the Gray, a forum for promoting an ethical mindset and ethical decision-making. Help us more clearly see both sides of complex issues and better navigate the moral challenges of everyday life. I'm Rabbi Yonason Goldson, and I would like to welcome my guests today. With me is Jeff Koziatek, who's a certified speaker and peak performance coach, helping professionals to navigate change, sharpen focus, avoid burnout, and make a difference. He is also one of St. Louis Business Monthly's 100 St. Louisans you should know. And now you do. Mark O'Brien is founder and principal of O'Brien Communications Group, a B2B brand management and marketing communications firm, and host of The Anxious Voyage, a syndicated radio show about life's trials and triumphs. Also could be the subtitle of my biography. And Annette Taylor is a researcher of evolutionary psychology and biology. Her website, Cave Dweller Club, offers guidance and insights on how we can better understand the way our own hardwiring influences unconscious bias and decision-making. Thank you all for being with me today.
Of that.
Thank you.
Yay.
And here is our topic. On May 1st, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed a bill prohibiting the production and sale of lab-grown meat. When I read the headline, I couldn't help wondering why. It seems that Bill Gates, a heavy investor in the industry, has publicly urged governments to enact legislation to shift towards 100% synthetic meat and eventually ban real meat. The Florida law represents a backlash against corporate and government overreach that attempts to limit personal choice and control private conduct. The irony, of course, is that by outlawing synthetic meat altogether, the legislation does exactly what it is designed to prevent. So who bears the blame here? Advocates for social engineering who seek to control behavior and limit choice, or the government for overreacting when it could just as easily have passed a bill guaranteeing free access to and availability of natural meat? In general, how many movements either self-destruct or produce needless controversy by inciting conflict rather than seeking principled compromise? Why do so many leaders seem incapable of recognizing that gradual implementation of innovative ideas is a far more effective way of producing positive change? The floor is open.
I'm just going to say that in public relations, there's a term called borrowed credibility. So if you can associate yourself with someone who's, I'll say, an established authority, theoretically, the credibility of that person or the authority of that person will accrue to you. I think in the case of Bill Gates, his money equates to borrowed authority and some level of expertise that I'm not sure is really warranted. On the other side of the coin, I think it's possible that Governor DeSantis might be reacting to some conspiracy theories. Number one being Bill Gates now owns 275,000 acres of farmland in the US, making him the single biggest farmland owner in the country. And ostensibly, the Chinese are also buying up a bunch of US farmland. So while DeSantis may be a bit reactionary in his approach, that may have been what was on his mind.
I will agree that.
Go ahead.
I will agree that Bill Gates can be a bit of a spark, I guess. And I didn't know that he was buying up farmland. It's interesting that he would have farmland, but also want people to move away from livestock. Kind of an interesting.
He doesn't raise livestock.
Okay, he just has it and doesn't. Okay, that makes.
Oh,
more sense.
no, he farms it, but it's all vegetables.
Okay, no cattle. Okay, got it.
Oh,
Okay, that's cool. So I looked up a short news clip about this. It was a local Florida news story about this. And when DeSantis signed the law, there were a few people in cowboy hats around him. And to me, it seemed more like a reaction to the lifestyle of like raising livestock. Like he was protecting his constituents in a way. Like I think in his mind, you know, in the immediacy of Florida-ness, that is probably what he was excited about doing. So I don't know. That's just my initial take.
I think I saw the same clip and I was wondering the same thing. Jonathan, you said who's to blame or who bears most of the blame? And I was wondering, what are we blaming for what?
amen. Same thought. And I just want to say before Jonas in response to that, Annette and Jeff, I applaud you both because neither one of you said pandering.
Mm.
If I had a hat, I'd tip it to both of you.
Only if it's a cowboy hat.
Oh, that's what I needed.
Look at that. Y'all are fantastic.
Okay, note to self, Annette's too quick for me.
I was expecting something about cave-dwelling hunters and gatherers, and then
Oh.
maybe that's coming up next.
Well, farming is beyond what I like, so go ahead.
Yeah, no, you're good to call me out, Jeff. It's always important to be precise in our language. When I say blame, I'm talking that we have a sort of combative situation where each side has staked out the most extreme position. Not that that is anything unusual in our politics. In fact, that's pretty much where I sort of hope we would go today, that compromise has become a dirty word.
Yeah.
Now it is a dirty word when it comes to compromising one's values, especially when they are core values. But at the same time, we have to live in a world with people who don't always agree with us. And, you know, one of I'm not a huge fan of Thomas Jefferson, but one of the things that he said that I think is extremely important is protecting people from the tyranny of the majority. Just because you have enough votes to win, to pass a bill, that doesn't give you the right, the moral right, and it shouldn't give you the legal right either to ram legislation down people's throats that is not taking into account more than 51% of the country or the community. And so, you know, the idea of working together to find some common ground where we can all get as much of what we want as possible, that mindset just doesn't seem to exist anymore, which is very disturbing. So when I say who's to blame, I'm saying in this particular situation, you have the perception, let's say, of one side trying to impose control over behavior, and the other side reacting as opposed to responding. Let's shut this down 100%, when there really seems to be a very reasonable, very achievable compromise that now appears to be off the table because both sides have staked out these extreme positions.
I gotta say, Bill Gates kind of started it by saying 100% lab meat. That's the first extreme I heard when I read the scenario. So I'm not saying that DeSantis should have gone to the other extreme, but when you start speaking in extremes, in my mind, you're going to go into fear mode, and then your brain turns off. So, yeah, That's my side.
Well, just to respond to that, I have many friends who are very staunch conservatives, and as a right-leaning moderate, they barely tolerate my presence. But very often their argument is, the Democrats started it or the liberals started it. And that may be true in certain situations, but so what? We still have to make things work.
Yeah, I'm not sure that leading with an accusation like that, the left started it, the right started it, is a way to get where we need to go. And I want to pick up actually on Jeff's question about blame and your response, Jonas, and about core values. I think it's possible that we learn as much about our own core values by discussing them with someone who doesn't share them, or whose core values are opposite from ours. And I agree with what you said, Jonason, that in response, let's just, it could have gone either way. No, it couldn't. Bill Gates started it. You're right in that. But in response to Bill Gates' extreme position, Ron DeSantis countered, reacted with his. And there is no, unless they talk to each other or two camps talk to each other, there is going to be no middle ground, which actually brings me to a question that I put at the very end of your commentary at the outset, Jonason. Who gets to define positive change? If we can't, aren't willing to define it together, not terribly sure it's positive.
You mean a
I agree.
collaborative decision on positive change?
Oh, you went there, huh?
The C word.
What?
A good C word.
Sorry.
That make you a collaborator?
Jonason, where did you find this guy?
Sorry. I'm out. I'm muting myself.
You're canceled, Jeff.
Please don't.
All I'm going to say, now that I've made my facetious cracks, I could not agree with you more, Jeff. If it's not collaborative, oh man, it's not going to be workable, and it's certainly arguable that it won't be positive.
Yeah.
Jonason, you've made the example on a number of occasions to which I've borne witness that, and you use Daniel Patrick Moynihan and Ronald Reagan as your examples, and those guys were reasonable, statesmanlike enough that even though they were politically polar opposites, they were willing to discuss things and work toward middle ground, both knowing at the outset they wouldn't get everything they wanted. And that was okay. We're not okay with that anymore.
Yeah, well, Reagan is famous for this 80-20 approach, which works when you are in power. You can expect to get 80 against 20. If you're not in power, then you're going to have to settle for less, but you shouldn't have to settle for nothing. I've been rewatching Gettysburg, which is a magnificent depiction of the Civil War, and one of the things that just makes it such an extraordinary film is that there's no caricature there. There's no stereotyping. You've got two sides, and both are portrayed as sincere and noble and dignified, even though they are fighting over an issue that today is completely off the table. And somebody's pointed out that 100 years from now, they're going to show footage of Obama eating a corn dog, and when the whole world has gone vegetarian, and nobody remembers who DeSantis was or that he passed this legislation, and you're going to say, "What a wicked man! He ate animal flesh."
Yeah, it's all relative. for
Yeah, values
sure.
change, and then while there are, I believe there are core values that are eternal. There are plenty of values that are popular that shift radically over time, and to be able to recognize that, progressives are moving in one direction. They're trying to move forward fast, and traditionalists are trying to slow things down. And ultimately, there's going to be tension there. That doesn't have to be destructive or toxic
Yeah, the
or
all or
produce gridlock.
nothing. Yeah, the all or nothing thing is, I think that's just because we're all coming off a pandemic and we're kind of all on edge and we want it our way or the highway because we're used to getting what we want when we want it from, online shopping or, I think it's just almost like an uber modern idea that we should get what we want. And it's like, ooh, that's not always true.
I saw something the other day about, and I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he's apparently a very famous podcaster, but he has very, very recently published a book that's already a New York Times bestseller, and it's called Slow Productivity. And when I saw that, I wondered, wow, I wonder if I wrote measure outcomes instead of output. That would be a New York Times bestseller. I'd probably have to write more words than that. But in response to what you were saying about the Civil War, Jonas, and what you were just saying, Annette, have you ever have you ever read The Guns of August by Barbara Tuchman?
Long time ago.
Okay, so that largely is about the events leading up to World War One. And I know what happened in World War One and how it came about. But as I was reading that book and reading what each of the parties was doing and deciding, I found myself saying, no, don't do that. Because you could just see what was coming. So, I understand why present circumstances are what they are, but they're also the product of human nature. And I mean, if we were capable of achieving utopia, probably would have happened by now.
Well, I love to point out that the word utopia literally means no place.
Is it really?
Yep.
Well, maybe we have gotten there.
Yeah.
No, please.
And that was part of Thomas More's message, that you can create a perfect society on paper, and you can try to draw some of the principles and implement them in your culture, but don't expect to create paradise on earth. It ain't gonna happen.
Well, and that brings us right back to compromise and, Jeff's invocation of the C word, collaboration. Yeah, I love to say it sounds good on paper. Boy, I know somebody, I can't even name the title because if the person happens to watch this, I'll be in trouble. But somebody I know wrote a book that reminds me of what you're saying, Jonas, about leadership and about essentially establishing a mandate that allows for no compromise. I mean, that's a recipe for failure, if you ask me. He didn't ask me, but I might have
Hey,
told him.
Mark,
Sure.
is that a recipe for disaster?
Yes.
Gotcha. If I may take us back to the blame thing for a second.
You may.
Who bears most of the blame for this polar opposite response to what Bill Gates is asking for? I feel like everything comes down to where we find our identity and significance and worth. And maybe in this particular case, Bill Gates might be coming from a place of lifestyle or belief or attitude about, hey, we need to move from the fossil fuels and we'll go over here because this is more sustainable, it's more environmentally friendly, and it's better for the animals. And so, we move from there. And then Ron DeSantis has all these constituents that they're wearing the cowboy hats. This is what they do. This is what they've always done. This is who they are. And if you replace that lifestyle, that way of life, that way of looking at the world with something else, then who are they? Who will they be? What will they do? And that's not okay. Now you're threatening potentially who I am, what makes me me. And so I
And
think
what
that,
you're doing for society. Like it's funny to think like traditionalists versus progressives. I think we all want to have a purpose. We all want to do something for our groups. And sometimes in modern life, you can pick a small group to do things for. But if you're providing food for people, that is a rather large group that you're providing something for. And I totally see that kind of level of pressure, maybe, that DeSantis is like, oh, and maybe he wants to do some good. Maybe he wants to make his constituents feel protected, which is actually the job of a leader. So,
right.
I mean, I think it's extreme, but it's almost not unreasonable at some level. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, when you're threatened, naturally our arms go up, and we've got high hands that we're defending ourselves, which is why I love what Mark said. I mean, I'm a big values guy, certified with the values conversation, certified with John Maxwell. People of value people. Everything I do is built on values. And so, if they were able to set that down, drop their hands and find common ground and shared values, to have I won't say a C word, a together conversation. I think that would be fantastic.
I like compromise better than that.
Jonathan, in your intro, once again, you cited irony. Jeff, I wonder if we find it ironic that I imagine Ron DeSantis might be among the first to argue against identity politics, but didn't he do that to some extent? And again, Annette and Jeff, both of you were above using the word pandering, but I'm not. By pandering to those cowboys, the guys with the cowboy hats. That was, seems to me, identity politics. And more generally, I wonder if, given what you said, Annette, about, I don't know that you necessarily mentioned the pace of change, but certainly things like immediate gratification. We want stuff now. Do we think that makes us more susceptible to unintended consequences?
I think so, because you're reacting. Like, I always picture people as actually still being part of nature, and things in nature change gradually. And if you want people to got onto a new idea, you should probably make a conscious effort to introduce it gradually. Otherwise, you are going to have these extreme reactions. And speaking of pandering, I want to point out one thing. So the cowboy group is probably not the only group he's pandering to, because when I listened to that news report, the lab meat, the production and distribution is banned, but researching it is not.
Yeah.
So that means all the universities. He's also pandering to the universities, because the universities can still work on making it happen. So he's not 100% anti. He's still allowing it to be studied.
That could be a topic for another episode, the difference between pandering and recognizing the interests of one's constituents.
Yeah.
Yeah, but your point about unintended consequences, Mark, that just strikes such a chord with me, because history is so full of really good ideas that did a lot of damage or had a lot of compensating downsides. Yeah, I was a huge proponent of the McCain-Feingold bill for finance reform in politics, and it completely backfired. It funneled donations away from the party, which had to address the needs of all its constituents, into the political action committees, which are polarized. A great idea that didn't work and caused more damage.
Wow.
All of the innovations for clean energy. I mean, you read about solar panels. Oh my gosh. The damage they do to the environments where they are, the way they affect flora and fauna, they're not recyclable. It's amazing. Wind turbines, they're all great ideas. But this rush to implement them because we want to take action. And then the further, let's start, electric cars, let's start shutting down the gas car industry. All of the effects to infrastructure, to the economy, to people's livelihoods. You can say that we're in a crisis, and maybe we are, but if you don't approach it, exactly what you said, Annette, if you don't approach it gradually, then you end up causing a lot more harm than anything you fix. And then you got to try to fix the harm that you caused, or you get the backlash again.
Yeah, that's almost the negative of having so much technology, because we can change things quickly.
There's a kind of arrogance that goes with that, isn't there?
Say again?
There's an arrogance. We think we can fix anything right away.
Yeah.
And I also think it's connected, at least in the United States, it's connected to the idea of career politicians. So if you want to justify your existence, you have to keep writing legislation, and I don't think that's helpful either. And it certainly runs counter to what you were suggesting, and that if people in Congress need to assure or ensure their re-elections, they got to be doing stuff, right? It's like somebody told me this joke once about when this was long enough ago, so the Pope was actually Italian, but he's wandering around the Vatican and he's saying to everybody, "Jesus is coming, Jesus is coming," and finally one of the cardinals says to him, "Well, what am I supposed to do?" And the Pope says, "Look busy." So these guys, they all got to look busy, right? Or they're not going to get reelected. And so they just keep cranking stuff out. There's not the degree of forethought that should be granted to it.
Or they just have to look busy, or just really committed to something and talk a lot.
Oh boy.
Well, Washington, D.C. to me is the ultimate status market. I've talked about this before, but status markets have three things: resources, rewards, and I can't remember the other thing. But Washington, D.C. has this like intensity to it, like that there's a constant hierarchy that's like, if you don't do something, then you're not going to get the attention, and maybe you can just chill and vote on stuff. Like, I don't know, it's kind of crazy when you think of it in terms of like win-lose or win-win. Like, wow, guys.
Yeah.
What was the term you used, Annette?
Status market.
I love that. Oh,
I made it up. I hope you love it. I can't. What?
So we can't Google it?
No, you can't Google it unless it comes anyway. So wait, I'm trying to remember the other R: resources, rewards. I'm so mad at myself.
Well, while you're thinking, you talk about looking busy, we have a comment from Jackie. She said, "Did anyone see the piece on CBS Sunday Morning about how recycling is a ruse and doesn't actually help the environment? They're claiming it was just a campaign to make people feel better about recycling." I mean, I heard this years ago, that it actually takes more energy to recycle than it saves in production. And
unless you
we
have
actually talked about that on the show once. Is it worthwhile to have a policy that makes people feel that they're making a positive contribution
Yeah.
to create a sense of responsibility,
Exactly.
or just deal with reality the
know.
way it is.
Yeah, there's a community in Florida that's now burning their trash because they think it's just easier and not that bad, not that different than trying to recycle everything.
Talk about full circle.
I know. It's crazy.
Hey,
That's what
speaking
Florida and
of
Texas are for, right?
full circle, Mark, well, Annette, I love how you throw it back to nature and how nature changes slowly, and when it changes, it's sustainable. And Mark talking about slowing things down, and Jonathan talking about how the quickness to switch to these other forms of power, we haven't thought it all through. So would it be better to slow down? If we were to play the devil's advocate on this, there are other people. I was just talking, Robert Miller, if you were watching, this is for you. This idea that some people come at it with an action oriented mindset. We're just going to do, and we'll figure it out. And if we go off this way, we'll just course correct and we'll eventually get there. Versus the people that need to think it all the way through first and then take action. He was talking about how the people that stop and think and move really slow get to the same spot at just about the same amount of time as the person that bumps and plows through all the walls, and they eventually get there. And so the cost over here looks different than the cost moving slow, but in the end of the day, the cost pretty much evens out, and the time does as well. What do you all think about that?
Look busy.
Thanks, Pope Mark.
In other words, it really doesn't matter, Jeff. That's what you're saying. Doesn't matter if we go fast or slow. We're going to end up at the same place at the same time.
I was in a conversation once, a Zoom conversation with 3 women, and one of them said, "Women are going to save the world." And I said, "Hold on a minute. Are you trying to tell me that you don't think testosterone is the answer?" And it reminded me, if you look up A Tale of Two Brains, there's a guy, I think he was some kind of minister or something. His name's Mark Gungor, Gungor. And he's got this really big stage, and on one side of it, he's got a man's head, and on the other side of it, he has a woman's head.
I've seen that video.
Okay, so one of the points he makes is that men believe they have to fix things, and women get frustrated with men because women just want to be listened to. And I think there's some of that going on too. There are so many fixers running around. Oh, we got to fix that. You haven't even fully diagnosed the problem. Again, back to your point in that. What's to be lost if we slow down and think things through? Not much.
Isn't it the tortoise and the hare? The tortoise wins.
Well, there you go. There you go.
This is why I bring this up, because I am a thinker, and I would prefer to move slow. And it seems like all 4 of us are like that. And so I'm just, is our way the only way? Is it just 100% synthetic meat is the only way? Or can we eat animals as well? Is there a space for both?
Yes, there is.
In the cave.
So,
Yes.
Yeah.
On the savannah.
that point about going slow, I heard a wonderful, read actually a wonderful illustration. If you have a body in orbit and you want to accelerate, so you increase your speed, that pushes you into a higher orbit where you end up going slower. Whereas if you slow down, you fall into a tighter orbit where you speed up.
Interesting.
Wow.
That's cool.
No
It's
wonder
interesting how the laws of physics can teach us lessons about life.
Wow.
Love it.
Micah.
Yeah, right. It's a seeming contradiction.
Yeah, well, it's sort of like collaboration.
Not that.
Hey, this is my show. I'll say whatever I want.
Oh,
No,
man,
but
you know
point
what?
is that, I'm
I just
giving-
have to go back to status market again. Jonas, and I sincerely wish you had thought to record this so that we could have that.
well, I'll go back in time and hit the record button.
Okay, good idea.
No, the whole idea of compromise or collaboration, whichever of those awful C words we choose to use, I'm giving up some of what I want to get more than I would be able to get otherwise by
In the long
demanding everything.
run. Yeah, and that requires trust, which I think is the antithesis to fear. And if you can just look around, if you're in a situation and energy is like, you can see it. That's fear. That's fight, flight, or freeze. And the antidote is trust, and you just need to try.
Yeah, I just saw a proverb today, or resaw it. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
I'm
That's
I'm an Aquarian, but I can't tell you
Libra.
that I'm necessarily bought into the whole age of Aquarius thing that's supposedly coming. But to the point you made earlier, Annette, about COVID, I think it gave us the time to recognize, or allowed us to recognize, how much we miss community. It's not accidental that Zoom took off as a result of COVID. I really wonder if the four of us would be here today having this conversation were it not for COVID. I call myself a fatalist wearing rose-colored glasses, but it actually does give me that little glimmer of hope that we're doing this, that we're recognizing our inherent need to do it. I've made more connections, meaningful connections, as a result of and through COVID than I had in the first decades of my life.
yeah, there's good and bad in everything. Like, you just
Yeah.
need to kind of think it through.
And I've made that same observation multiple times. This podcast, my other podcast. I had a co-host on my previous podcast, and we met on an online panel during COVID, and the chemistry was there, and we had a long run. For my co-host had some health issues and couldn't continue, but it was an extremely rewarding enterprise, as is this. And all of you except Jeff, I wouldn't know if not for an online community. It demonstrates that we really do long for these kinds of connections where we can have thoughtful conversations. We don't have to agree with each other on everything, but just the process of trying to work through complicated issues so we can better understand ourselves and each other, and maybe find a way forward.
Ooh, pick
Yes.
me, I have a question.
Yes, last word, Jeff.
No, oh shoot. All right, so we're going to end with a question, because you said, is it better to your voicemail to
Suffer the
debate?
slings and arrows of outrageous fortune.
No, not that one.
Oh,
Is
sorry.
it better to resolve an issue without debating it, or debate an issue without resolving it?
Yes.
So my final question is, do you think it's easier to have these panel discussions here where we are not married to the outcome?
Yes.
And as such, we can talk about this more fluidly and more relaxed, and we have a sense of trust. I'm wondering what would happen if if the results were more affected by those, how that would impact our discussion.
And since Jonason brought up physics, I will tell you that the physicist Richard Feynman said, I would rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned.
Oh,
That's
I like you, Mark.
good.
That was not original.
All right, I take it back. I don't like you.
Feynman, you said?
Yeah, Feynman.
Well, if you go back a couple of thousand years to the Talmud, which are discussions of the sages trying to understand the oral tradition handed down from Sinai, there are quite a few instances that conclude with the word teku, which means let it stand.
Mm.
It's better to acknowledge that we don't have an answer than it is to fudge the answer.
Mm.
Yeah,
Right?
because that's not reality anyway.
Exactly.
I'd really like to live in a reality-based world.
And that
That's
if
radical.
if I connect with you on LinkedIn and you find that reality-based world, would you please tell me where it is?
I know where it is, Mark.
You do?
Oh,
Yep.
Yeah. Do you have a map?
I can tell you about it, but it's about looking at life from before we got into all these cultural groups, about biology and the basics.
But you have to become a premium member, Mark, before you.
Oh, nice. Spoken like a true salesman.
That's a status market. I don't know.
No, I
And
got
speaking
on-
of premium memberships, we're gonna wrap this up, and but for premium members, there is a backstage conversation that will continue. If you go to my Substack, you can sign up there. Otherwise, thank you very much to my guest today, Jeff Koziatek, Annette Taylor, Mark O'Brien.
Thank you.
Thoughtful, enlightening, and as often happens, more questions than answers, but we've demonstrated that that's healthy and that's beneficial as well. To those of you in the audience watching or listening, if you have a topic you'd like to take up, please go to my website, ethicsninja.com, use the contact information, submit your idea. If it's compelling, we will definitely take it up on a future episode. And until then, as always, I encourage you to continue grappling with the gray.